I've realised I've...
There we go. Hello and welcome to the Scotland Rugby News podcast with me, your host, Bruce Aitchison from Happiness Egg-Shaped, and him, the editor from Scotland Rugby News, the one and the only Gavin Harper. How are you, sir?
Very well, very well. How are you, Bruce?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. And apologies to anybody that's been sitting here for 24 hours waiting for us to get started. There was some technical issues last night that were way beyond any of us, and it turns out that the software we use, StreamYard, was having a moment last night, so we weren't able to go live as previously planned. So here we are in full Technicolor, and it's great to be here. Gav's been at Murrayfield today speaking to some people, and he's got some more news for us, and things are just cooking along nicely for the start of the season. Gav?
Yeah, it feels like Edinburgh and Glasgow have been in pre-season for a while now, but yeah, it's Glasgow's first game, of course, is Saturday night against Zebre. So yeah, we're not a million miles away from the big kick-off again, which is exciting.
Yeah, and so we've got a special guest tonight. We had Meryl Smith on with us last week to talk about Scotland women, and with big news coming out of Murrayfield in the last week about David Nucifora joining, we thought, right, who do we speak to? Now, I know this guy because I worked with him a while ago. Top man, great insight, heaps of knowledge of all rugby, having been in Ireland, Wales, France, and gets to watch a fair bit of rugby, gets to comment on it, give his opinion. So we were keen to get this insight. So we're going to welcome on Gav, the one and the only, Mr. Bernard Jackman. Hello, sir. He's on his way.
Hi, Bruce. Hi, Gavin. Thanks for having me. Yeah, good to catch up again.
It's great to see you. So Bernard, I'm keen, and I did give you a little prompt on this one. When you're in the middle of something, I always laugh at New Zealanders who tell me that the New Zealand Rugby Union is disorganised and it's a shambles, and they don't. Whereas from the outside looking in, we think, oh, everything's rosy in New Zealand. We're in the middle of Scottish rugby. We have an opinion, but I'm really interested to get your opinion from an outsider. What's your opinion of Scottish rugby?
I think at pro level, I would have massive respect and always would fear an Irish team playing against Edinburgh, Glasgow, or an Irish team playing Scotland. I know in recent years it's we've been lucky enough to win more than we've lost, but I think there's a very healthy level of respect there. My fear is just your underage program, and obviously, looking at the club game over there and speaking to some people, it's just that lack of real clarity about where it's going. It seems to be from the outside. Now maybe I'm behind the times, but there was a couple of under-20s teams over the last 4 or 5 years where there was a big gulf, and obviously it's not the be-all and end-all, and you can probably get away with having some average years, but if that's on a consistent basis and you're not getting players that are going to come through and be good pro players and be good internationals, well then after a while you have to fear for the overall development. And I suppose David Nucifora's appointment is probably an effort from the SRU to try and address the whole landscape of Scottish rugby. And it was a big surprise when it broke here last week with Peter Riley in the Sunday Times, because I think we were all under the understanding that he was kind of tied down by Australia, and that looked like a logical move back. Australia and a little bit of a rebuild as well, and obviously Joe Schmidt and himself had worked well together in Ireland for a long time, but Scotland, it seems a bit of a coup for Scotland, really. But the challenge is the system that David Nucifora inherited here and probably steered. It is quite different, and that's going to be the challenge. And it costs a lot of money. I mean, the IRFU backed David Nucifora to the absolute hilt, whether that was in hiring staff, whether that was adding to data analysts, sports scientists, the Sevens program. It's a big something that he really believes in, and it wasn't something that was really in our culture. And we put a lot of money into that, both male and female. Obviously, we had two teams in Paris. no medal, but not not very far away. So, but the money was there to invest in it. And my question, probably back to you guys, is the money there? And also, I think probably the question mark around David Nucifora a little bit was, look at the reality is our underage system is underpinned by schools, private schools, and that's been there 120 years, so I don't know if you could claim credit for that, or that David Nucifora could claim credit for that. But the problem, the issue, the worry I would have from a Scottish point of view is he saw, I can't remember what, I was in France at the time, but he felt the club game wasn't, I suppose, doing what it needed to do to help Team Ireland. It wasn't helping develop players who maybe were missed out by the academies, etc. And there was a bit of conflict, a lack of agreement with the clubs and the club representatives. And effectively, once he didn't get his own way, he just walked away and just left them. So effectively, that hasn't, that's kind of been driven by its own agenda and the pride people have in their clubs. But there wasn't that alignment that you would say we strive for, and there was never an attempt, from my understanding, to go back and readdress that. So that's just something. Look at, it's not, I mean, the 2 years is probably he had 10 years in Ireland, so 2 years is a short period, and maybe that'll become longer. But I would say is that his management style is kind of, you either follow his way, or or you kind of get left behind pretty quickly. And maybe that's what's needed as well. Like the reality is, when you look at people who have sorry, I keep talking here, but if you're looking for someone to do his job, the job that Scotland want, or Ireland wanted 10 years ago, or Australia wanted to look at, like, there's not many people qualified to do it in terms of who have experience of being a coach, which he obviously was with the Brumbies, who have the administrative experience, have that experience of high performance, and have a lot of time in jobs. Whereas, like, you could get a recently retired pro with a high profile, but they won't have potentially have sat at a desk for in a sporting organization for a long time, and I suppose negotiated and communicated with World Rugby and different player agencies and all that different side of it. And I think one thing, not one thing, but something that he deserves massive credit for is, if you look at Irish players tend to stay in Ireland. Now, they're well paid. There's a good program here. But generally those contracts, those central contracts, which he was in charge of, were done by and large without any drama, without any stress, without any negativity. So he was always able to, and again, he deserves credit for that. He was able to get those premium players tied down without that ever becoming a distraction. And that's I'm not saying Scotland have an issue with that, but it's something that he definitely did very well.
There's a lot in there, Gav. I'm going to let you take up the money question.
Yeah, it's certainly an interesting point, because I think at a time when you want to be able to have money to throw at the problem, the Scottish Rugby find themselves £10 million and more in the hole, and yeah, I think it's a fair point. It's a fair question. Where does the money come from to fund all this? I just wonder. It obviously comes with a big pedigree, but do you get the sense, you mentioned it there, Bernard? Do you get the sense that it's very, you either follow what David Nucifora does or you fall by the wayside? Is that?
I think, and again, I think. He loved the sevens, and so the sevens got plenty of investment. The club game, as I said, he did try and get involved in it. The initial negotiations or discussions weren't the way he wanted, so he just kind of washed his hands of it. He would, I mean, the provinces wouldn't be overly happy with him. The feedback about the provinces around what he like to deal with wouldn't be that positive. And I think our provincial teams have gone backwards, not drastically, but in terms of silverware, obviously. We haven't won a European Cup since 2018. Ulster had a very tough year last year, just barely qualified for the Champions Cup. Connacht haven't qualified for Champions Cup. So I think that it's definitely been Team Ireland. Like, Team Ireland above all else. And in fairness, I can understand why he wasn't potentially popular with the provinces, because, maybe some of that conflict was around, non-Irish qualified players being signed, which didn't help Team Ireland, if you get me. So I think in his position, being overly popular with everybody, is a dangerous thing to look for as well. Like, and I think, to be honest, part of the reason he was brought in was because we were transitioning from kind of committee-led decisions, where, Munster, Ulster, and Leinster, and Connacht to a lesser extent, had representatives on a committee, and decisions would often be made, maybe with a political element to it, rather than cutthroat professional rugby. This is what we need to do. So I think he was exactly what we needed. And obviously the fact that he lasted 10 years shows you that from an IRFU point of view and from a board point of view, he was delivering on what they asked him to do. And I think he spotted Andy Farrell's potential as an assistant coach who could become a very good head coach. He was exactly the type of coach we needed after Joe Schmidt, who also, Nucifora had worked incredibly well with and brought Ireland lots of success. I think Paul O'Connell, I think from an Irish point of view and Team Ireland point of view, whatever they wanted, he made sure they got. That was like Paul O'Connell, Simon Easterby, Mike Catt. His fingerprints were all over all those recruits. And yeah, I think he is, as I said, I think this is a position that is still, despite the fact we're 30 years into professional rugby, there isn't a lot of people who CVs merit the responsibility that the SRU are giving him, or Ireland gave him, back 10 years ago and had for the last 10 years. And his experience and credibility in pro rugby at international level is as good as anyone out there. I can't think of another candidate who has the CV he has. And yeah, I think it's a big boost for Scottish Rugby. I didn't realise how that the financial situation was that stark. But look at that. As I said, that'd be the interesting one for me. How will he operate without the kind of resources that the IRFU certainly gave him? And to be fair, like, the IRFU gave it to him, and I think there has been a fair bit of success. There'll be criticism around World Cups and things like that for us, but look, you can't put it all on him. And certainly the international players speak very highly of him. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a coup for Scotland, to be honest.
I think for the point you made there, Bernard, is an interesting one about Team Ireland, because I think there's this undercurrent of feeling at the minute here that Scotland have to win something, that we're long overdue some sort of major success. Do you think, because you're obviously only on a 2-year contract, do you think that will almost be the focus, and it could be to the detriment of the success of Edinburgh, less so, but Glasgow, obviously won the URC. So
yeah.
Do you think the pro clubs will fall by the wayside in search of success for Team Scotland?
It's a tough one. I mean, like, we would have found here that it was quite limiting in terms of non-Irish qualified, and we had 4 teams. You guys only have 2, so I would imagine he's going to be very. I don't think I don't say strict, but you need a good business case to be able to get a foreign recruit hired, when obviously he's going to look to try and give Gregor as many Scottish qualified players who are getting regular game time as possible to pick from. I think that's something that he definitely brought into in Ireland, and and I think what he tried to do was, if you look at Munster being allowed to sign Damien Delande and RG Snyman, I think they didn't mind signing off on foreign players. They were just looking for top end, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think fans and players alike would agree that he'd rather have a Scottish player or an Irish player playing, not a journeyman, but just a young player coming through, or someone who's somewhere in your depth chart than a run of the mill non-Scottish qualified or Irish qualified, so I think that's like he's not afraid to sanction those big signings. I think he was actually quite strict on the other ones, which is, again, it's not a big deal, but I think it's not a big deal, and it's certainly good for Team Ireland point of view. But I think some of the provincial coaches would have felt at times that maybe they would have liked a little bit more depth, and a little more freedom to spend their money as they felt was best served for that province. So I think, to be honest, maybe the 2-year contract initially, he'll probably, realistically, he'll only really get a chance to have success with Scotland, Glasgow, and Edinburgh. Like if there's not the talent in your under 17s, under 18s now, okay, obviously he's going to have to look and see how he can improve that. But you're not going to know in a year's time, 2 years' time, the benefit of those decisions that need to be made. You know what I mean? So the only real results he can get, in my opinion, short term, are, bar the political and the structural changes, which obviously people make their minds up about whether they're good or bad, but it'll take time to actually come to fruition, is really Glasgow, Edinburgh, and Scotland. And also, if you're in a bad financial situation or difficult financial situation, I mean, I would imagine, I don't know, I'm not privy to the accounts, but I imagine that your best chance of revenue is success with Scotland, full stadiums, bigger crowds in Glasgow and Edinburgh, and so I think you have to kind of keep investing in that, and you have to be very careful where you make cuts in those teams, because sometimes sometimes cuts there can have an effect very quickly, and luckily the global market for rugby players and coaches is a buyer's market at the moment anyway, so salaries are coming down, etc. So but definitely I wouldn't see, I'd say he will want to give Gregor and your regional coaches or your franchise coaches the best possible chance of having success quickly.
Yeah. If you're watching this and you've got a question, please stick it in the comments, and Gav will keep an eye on it. You might have a question for Bernard. Bernard, I am interested in your point about Team Ireland, because the model is that you're an employee of Irish Rugby. So Team Ireland is the marquee, and all roads lead to Team Ireland. And then you made the point about the sevens. Was the sevens an end in itself, or was the sevens used? And this is a really naive view from me. It kind of felt like it was almost the fifth province. It was an opportunity to give others an exposure to the top level of the game. Or so was it a development tool, or was it an end in itself?
I think that this is the big issue from a men's point of view. It was a place where we kind of high potential academy players were on a case by case basis, kind of if it suited the player and it suited the province, they were given exposure to that. So, like Will Connors, Hugo Keenan, etc., are examples of players who would say that sevens experience was a major role in their development. Then the issue was when, as you started to become more focused on results and trying to qualify for Olympics or win World Series events, then we ended up probably having the majority of them were specialist sevens players who, to be honest, probably wouldn't come back into the provincial setup and then wouldn't go back into Team Ireland. But the only thing about the sevens, we invested quite a bit of money in it. But there is, because it's an Olympic sport, there's an opportunity to get funding from a different source, Sport Ireland, for that. So once you make the Olympics, then it doesn't cost as much as it does initially to get up and running. I think the issue David had was the women's game became a big issue for him from a PR point of view. Ireland slipped off massively, ended up in and lots of arguments being played out in the press. And he put someone in there, a kind of trusted, confident of his, and that didn't go well. And the sevens were seen as being a development for the 15s, but then they weren't playing enough 15s. You were getting athletes from other sports who learned sevens but struggled then to play 15s or have an immediate impact on the 15s. And the Six Nations in particular is something where it's live on TV. For those 5 or 6 weeks, there's more focus on it than there is normally, and then results were poor, and that caused a little bit of a lot of negativity, to be honest, a lot of negativity. So I think the sevens was probably seen as more development for the women's side. That didn't really work out, and then you had some players who preferred to stay playing sevens and come back to 15s and all that stuff. So it was quite tricky. But from a men's point of view, I think the idea was that you would have high potential academy players who are already in the system as 15s players, and that would be a development block for them. And as I said, everybody who's come through to play for Ireland haven't played sevens, but certainly I do believe that on a case by case basis, it was looked at, because we have a 3-year academy system here. So effectively not every year, but at least once a year, each player is looked at on an individual basis and seeing, well, what do they need? What do they need to develop, whether that's physical, or whether that's mental, or whether that's playing sevens or game time somewhere else, a different position, etc. So I do think it was a benefit from that. So that'll be interesting. I remember Scotland were very strong at sevens. Well respected on the circuit a while back. But obviously it does cost money. So again, but I see the thing is, for me, I think that's probably something that you look at if you're going to be there a long time, so, and maybe like you could end up being there 10 years as well. But initially 2 years, I think he's going to have to look at the pathways and get something started there. He's probably going to have to look at the club game and try and get a balance right with only two professional sides. You probably need something that's in between, just a bridge to the pro game. Look at maybe these all things are sorted out, and then and then obviously the pro game, he's going to have to be like really results and performance focused to try and help, as I said, those 3 teams, including Scotland, obviously, be as successful as possible.
It's incredible.
Sorry, Gav, I'm going to jump in there. When he started with Ireland, was he wearing a tin hat and body armour? Because it to go from that committee situation to... But it sounds like it was maybe the ideal, because actually we just need somebody to get on with it, because if we sit in committees, it's going to take forever. I'm imagining from his 10 years, there'll be things he'll look at and say, I could have done that quicker. That was something I put time into, and it was ill-judged. That failed straight away. So I'm not saying he could do 10 years in 2, but from that beginning at Ireland, Gav and I certainly are hoping it's going to be maybe a quicker start.
Without a doubt. Like, to be honest, like his job description, in fairness, I do admire the IRFU massively, because they actually, the way they set his job description up, they took power away from themselves. They actually kind of, they took away responsibility or power and said, we trust in you. You're the professional. You deliver on this. And that's not an easy thing to do. And they did that. But definitely, for sure, he will have learned a huge amount. For sure, he can go. And like, also, let's be honest, he'll be well aware of of the Scottish landscape. He would have been dealing with Jim Malner, whoever has been looking after Jan McGinty before him at meetings over the last 10 years around Six Nations and around URC and all that. So he'll have senior under 20s teams. He'll have seen some of your own age grade below that. It's not like when he came over first, where he didn't really understand Northern Hemisphere rugby, and that's nothing against. Like, he hadn't worked in Northern Hemisphere rugby. He's in a new country. He's trying to work out who's who, etc. Like, I think he can get in there and get going very quickly, and that's exciting. And I'm sure that's why he took the job. And I think the big thing about him is and this is a strength, I think, is he doesn't suffer fools, and he's quite stubborn. He's quite no. Sorry, I don't mean that. That's in every walk of life. But he if he has a plan, he'll deliver the plan, and he won't get caught up in politics too much. And again, the beauty of being a consultant probably is he can probably not worry about job security. He can just get it done, So I actually think, I said I'd only be positive about the potential impact he could have there. I think it's set up perfectly. That he has the 2-year contract initially as a consultant to go in and just break the eggs you need to make an omelette.
That we're going to clip that last kind of minute, Bernard, and we're going to pump that out to Scottish Rugby supporters.
No. Just to be clear, like I'm not saying there's fools in like that wasn't.
I mean, you're saying he's going to be able to come in, he's going to get on with it. He's good. I mean, that's music to my ears. What you just told me.
There's no doubt. If you want someone to do that, he is the person to do it. There's no doubt in terms of his own personality, his own way of working, and then, as I said, the body of work he has in pro rugby, and also in the Northern Hemisphere now. I mean, there's definitely a difference to what worked in Australia. Like he would have, I'd say probably we kind of had the period where he thought everything in Australia was better than what's in Ireland or anywhere else. You know what I mean? And I think now he realizes. You look at the makeup of his hires over the last 2 years. There's a value in actually understanding Irish rugby, Northern Hemisphere rugby. The landscape here, and I think he's got much better at that, and I think you guys will benefit from that as well. So, I think it was something that I didn't think was going to happen, because I presumed Australia would nail him down, locks, because especially with the Lions coming next year as well. But look, they seem to be having their own, restructuring and trying to find their way. But I think from Scottish point of view, I'm not saying it'll definitely work, because you can't guess that, but in terms of all the ingredients to work, it should, in all probability, it should move them on for sure.
So obviously, I do keep saying this is obviously a 2-year contract initially, but Gregor Townsend's contract's up in 2026 as well. So do you think part of that will be succession planning for what does eventually come after? And I suppose that leads us, we've had a question that I just want to run by. It's slightly off topic, but who wins the URC this season? And then, who's the best coach for Scotland? Gregor Townsend, or could somebody like Franco Smith from Glasgow move into that job?
Yeah, look, I think obviously, I think Gregor has obviously got huge longevity, massively passionate. I think he's shown an ability and a desire to evolve. And I think Scotland do look to be getting better. And I know that probably Scottish fans have had a few false dawns, but I do think they're on the right track. Obviously, if Gregor was to come to an end, someone like Franco's come in, and coached Glasgow to success, has a style of play that is very easy on the eye, which I would think suits Scottish players. It's not a million miles away from Gregor's kind of Glasgow. Back at the start. I would imagine that Franco would be in pole position. But I'd love to see Gregor with a support of Nucifora, who, in fairness to him, he does really support his head coaches, and is very much in and around international camp, and could be that mentor or that support for that brings Scotland to the next level and helps Gregor get the results that he wants, in terms of rugby. So I'd say give Gregor 2 years with someone like Nucifora who's helping guide the program, and then see where you land. But obviously Smith's had an amazing impact on Glasgow. I mean, I was commentating for TV on Danny's last game with Glasgow, in Leinster, which was, I think it was 60 points or something like that. And you kind of look at that team and you go, Jesus, is there anything there to work with? And obviously there was, but just teams go through cycles. But Franco came in, and obviously you could see the team just building that kind of that togetherness, they had the game plan, but they also had that togetherness and fight. And they came out of Munster in the URC semi-final, and it was just incredibly impressive. And then obviously that win in the Bulls was huge. And it's amazing what a trophy can do for a team. So that could drive them on to go back to back, or to do something special in Europe. And that's huge. I think to win the URC, you can't. Leinster have to win a URC again soon, given the talent they have. So I wouldn't write bet against them. And I believe Nina Barr has come back this summer and kind of really, because he came in after the World Cup. So Leinster have the best playing squad, I think, in terms of depth and in terms of international quality players. But the great thing about the URC is how much more competitive it is now than maybe it was 4 or 5 years ago, and the South Africans have added a huge amount to
it. The point you made about URC and succession planning, are Ireland frustrated at performance of the 4 franchises, provinces?
The problem is, Bruce, is that in some ways, and I think they're going to try and change this. So effectively, the central contract model we have has become incredibly based around Leinster, and that's not Leinster's fault. It's just as I said, the best private schools are in the Leinster area. So Leinster Academy traditionally is stronger. So Leinster under 18s beat Munster by 50 points to 14 yesterday. It's just that's the way it starts. At 16s, 18s, and population bias is massive, and then it's a lot. Hence Leinster have more internationals, more players who get central contracts, and then the central contracting system. How it did work is that effectively that's paid by the IRFU, and it doesn't come out of your provincial budget as such. So even though everybody's paid by the IRFU, there's effectively 2 budgets. So you have your international players, and then you have your provincial budget. So Leinster, by having, I can't remember how many, I think they have 12 central contracts. Munster had 2, Peter Manny and Conor Murray, and Ty Byrne. Peter Manny's gone.
And with that, Bernard has left us.
Here
he comes. He's back again.
As quick as he was gone, he's back.
Sorry. So how the model works is basically Connacht have 1 central contract, Bundy Aki. Ulster have 1, Ian Henderson, who realistically probably wouldn't get renewed. And then you look at the Ulster squad and you don't see anyone who's automatically going to get one. As I said, Munster had 3, Ty Byrne, Peter Manny, Conor Murray, Peter Manny and Conor Murray. Obviously, they're not going to have them for much longer. So, and then Leinster have 11 or 12. So that's an issue. So the expectation for the fans in Connacht, Ulster and Munster is Munster, hate me saying this, but they don't realistically expect to win European Cups, right? And then the Munster I grew up playing against, that's where they were. They were the standard bearers in Ireland, and so I think that's the issue. Is effectively we've kind of become a little bit Team Ireland, Team Leinster, and 3, right? And that is kind of that has just happened over the last 4 or 5 years, and not enough has been done to address that. I think the failing or criticism of David Nucifora from an Irish point of view is that we have kind of allowed that happen, where you've got Leinster who are very strong but aren't winning European Cups, so or URCs over the last 3 or 4 years, and then the others have just dropped off a little bit. But particularly Ulster and Munster have dropped off from where they potentially were. That's not maybe all. I'm not saying that's David Nucifora's fault, but that's just the way it's happened. So from an Irish point of view, I think there will be the World Cup year and the way we went to the World Cup with expectations. Everyone was very much on that bandwagon of Team Ireland. Then we ended up obviously winning the Six Nations, so that probably that makes everyone happy about Team Ireland being very strong. But I think at the end of the season, people are starting to ask questions around: can we have a strong Ireland and 4 very strong provinces? And I suppose David Nucifora's replacement is a fellow called David Humphreys, and I think that'll be his legacy will be. Can he get Ireland? Can he get the women's team, stronger and women's game stronger? but can he get our Leinster winning European Cups or Munster, Ulster winning European Cups? Realistically, Connacht, the next goal for them is to be back in Europe, you know. But that's the challenge.
I'm laughing because we've only got two. You know, you're talking about four, and we've only got two, trying to make two teams stronger. For David Humphreys, was there a feeling, you know, and you can only give your opinion, is there a feeling that it was time for something new?
Yeah, I
David
think so.
Nucifora had 10 years and, you know, you'd seen what he had.
I think so. I think it's very hard for any person to in a job that volatile, and a job where you're not making friends every day. You know what I mean? You're constantly saying no to people. You're saying no as much as you say yes. So yeah, I don't think there was a push for him to leave, but I think we kind of knew it was coming to an end, and the IRFU had lots of sight of that, so they were able to do a very extensive search and a good handover. So it's exactly what you would want. You know, if David wasn't going to stay after year two, I'd imagine he would flag that, and he would help potentially, you know, hire his successor or be part of a very fluid handover. So no, yeah, I don't look, David. I think a lot of people have a huge amount of respect and gratitude towards David for what he's done. And we, you know, to be honest, I think the general consensus was he was heading home. You know, he'd done his 10 years and he was heading home to Australia. So that we all felt it was kind of a natural end. It ended at, it should have ended at it was due to end at the World Cup, and then because we had two teams in the Olympics, and he'd been a massive part of him was qualification for those two Olympic, or the men's and women. So he stayed on for that. So yeah, it wasn't. It was all very well planned and calendarized.
So when Gav mentioned about Scotland having succession planning, who were his foot soldiers in those 10 years? Did he go through a few deputy dogs or
no? Well, look, he would have
stuck with him.
He had to sign off on provincial hires, you know. So Graham Roundtree or Andy Friend back in the day, you know. I'm not sure if he signed off. I think David Nucifora probably signed off on Richie Murphy, but he would have signed off on Dan McFarland originally. So, like, as I said, he identified that Andy Farrell had the potential to be a head coach, and that was quite seamless. And that could have been tricky because, you know, Japan didn't go well for us, and you know, yet you were hiring one of the people, you know, involved to take on the next cycle, the next World Cup cycle, the Paris. Players like to have sometimes different voice, but they were getting a voice they already had. You know what I mean? So I thought that was a brave decision, and it worked. Like, I mean, you would not believe how highly rated Andy Farrell is by players. And in actual fact, to be honest, it's Team Ireland, the environment, the coaching, the culture is so good. Like, everybody wants to be part of it, you know. So it actually makes it harder for the provincial coaches because when they come back to the provinces, it's a step down, you know. And that's credit to Nucifora, David Nucifora, in fairness, for spotting that and putting the people around Andy, which allows him to be the kind of coach he is as well. So yeah, it's been a very successful 10 years. We always want more, but it has been a very profitable 10 years.
Yeah, that's because you're bloody spoiled.
Oh yeah, probably.
Yeah. Gav and I have spoken before, Bernard, about not knowing where the next Scotland coach is coming from.
Yeah.
Who's the next Irish coach?
Look, I think that's the interesting one. So Andy's going to take a step back for the Six Nations, obviously because he's on Lions duty. So Simon Easterby is going to step up. I don't know if the next head coach, I think, will be either Simon Easterby, Paul O'Connell, potentially Ronan O'Gara, who's obviously done amazingly in La Rochelle. I think it'll probably be one of those three, and then, you know, you've got guys like Mike Prendergast, who's attack coach in Munster, who's obviously got great experience, and he was with me in Grenoble with me, Oyonnax, Stade Francais, Racing 92. he could come in and be part of the support staff. I actually think, to be honest, I could see Farrell doing another cycle. I could see him doing 2028 2027 and 2031, because he lives in a very nice part of Dublin. It's a very nice job. No, it's a nice job. It's well paid. It's a nice job. You've got very professional players who play for provinces, who win a lot. So they're coming in with belief. As I said, I think the IRFU and David Nucifora before him. Obviously, we have to see how he works with David Humphreys, but they have facilitated whatever he needed. Whether that's training camps or better facilities or whatever, or whether that's just basically him saying, "Look, I need this player to be contracted quickly," and it happened. So I don't know why he would leave, to be honest. And again, this is good.
I'm really interested by all of that, because Leo Cullen's name never came anywhere close to your.
No, because I see Leo as I actually think Leo. When I think of Leo, I think he was a potential to replace Nucifora, if you get me. Because that's his role more so. He's less hands-on coaching, but finds the coaches. So found Nina Barr, found Blindale, found Andrew Goodman, found Stuart and allowed Stuart Lancaster coach. So I would see Leo's next step to be kind of a high performance director, and maybe he's on the record as saying that he's going to coach. He's coaching less and less. So he's more of he runs a very good program. He runs a very good program, which is exactly what a high performance director do. So it was only for that reason. There wasn't a lack of respect for him. I think Farrell is interesting, and our last two coaches have been hands-on coaches. So Joe Schmidt, hands-on everything. Farrell is incredibly hands-on. He runs our team attack, but obviously his background is defense. So when I was thinking, I wasn't thinking of a DOR. I was thinking more of a head coach who's on the pitch every day with running sessions.
I suppose, Bernard, to circle back a bit on the David Nucifora stuff, you mentioned the women's programme. Ireland were Grand Slam winners in 2015, and then it obviously has fallen away fairly significantly since. It's an area that Scottish Rugby have invested a lot of money in over the last 2 or 3 years, 2 years particularly. Is there a chance that David Nucifora could come in and redirect the money that's gone towards the women's game somewhere else?
No, I don't think so. I think, in actual fact, and this is what the RFU would be very sensitive to the criticism that was put out there, because they actually invested lots in it. It was just the players felt that there wasn't an understanding of what they needed to get better, if you know what I mean. So it wasn't. I actually think the RFU threw plenty of money at it. Obviously, you could always throw more at it, but it wasn't that. It was actually they didn't. Again, this is the criticism out there. I'm not sure what's true, but the criticism from people within the women's game was they didn't embrace the clubs. They didn't understand the need for support for coaches, the need for better competition. And as I said, the criticism would have been that they became too focused on the sevens and thought you could just move sevens players into the Six Nations squad and 15s and that'll be okay. Whereas we didn't have the front five depth, for example. I mean, and look, to be honest, this isn't for some reason that 2015 Grand Slam team it was that win didn't increase dramatically young girls playing rugby. So our player pool is quite small. Our player pool is quite small compared to France and England, obviously massively small. But now my feedback, the feedback I'm getting from clubs is that there's a lot more young girls in clubs playing mini rugby and coming through. So again, it just takes time for that to come into the senior playing pool. But I wouldn't see him. In actual fact, I'd say he'll be very keen for the women's program to continue to grow, because I'm sure that's one of the regrets he has from his time here, was that he got a lot of criticism around the failures of the women's program. So I would imagine he'll definitely would want to to make sure that's a success.
And with Scottish Rugby picking up somebody like David Nucifora, Glasgow being URC champions, which I know you're pretty admirable or admiring. Gregor, you've spoken highly of. Are there things you can see from the work you do in the URC? Are there things you look at in Scotland and think there's an easy win for them, or there's something that could be improved?
Yeah, look, I like your best players playing in Ireland, or in Scotland, like in Ireland for us, Scotland for you. If there was a chance to, I think obviously the project player is going to be harder now with the 5 years, and like we benefit from that massively, whether it's Cedar Sander or Bundy Aki, etc. But that's a harder thing now. So I think the big win for David Nucifora, even though he won't benefit from it, but what will give Scotland long-term comfort is to look at your pathways and your club game, and eventually, the goal should be to try and have 3 teams professional if you can. I know that sounds far-fetched, but to have enough depth that you could have 3 teams who are Scottish qualified, or at least have that a 15 playing abroad, who are eligible, and the more of them that you can kind of mold yourselves through your own pathway. I think, as I said, he won't get the benefit of it in 2 years, but if he's able to implement the type of changes and the joined up thinking and the passion for that development phase or club game and make that stronger, I think he'll have his legacy will be better than maybe win another URC. I think that's the reality of it. If in 7, 8, 9 years time Scotland have a better player playing pool, and it's not just once off, it's just consistently running. And that's the thing about the Irish system is you don't have to worry about it. You might have a year where you don't have a generational player, but next year you will, because you just trust that they're there. I'm lucky enough I commentate on Leinster Schools games for TV. I mean, the talent is phenomenal, and they're well coached, and they're technically and tactically ready. They're physically in a good program, but it takes like some of the coaches coaching there. Could be coaching professionally somewhere, but they're back in their old schools, they're teachers and coaching on the side, and they're putting a huge amount of time in. There's S&C, there's sports psychology, there's nutrition, and that's that. We were lucky. I said that model was driven probably by private schools competing for kids to come in and pay fees. So, and rugby was a part of that. So if that's model is not suitable to Scotland, that's that's fine, but you have to find a model that will I suppose increase the profile of rugby in young men and women, and that the environment they're in is conducive to getting the best out of their talent.
I'm laughing, and Gav had a little smile there, Bernard, because that is probably one of the hottest topics here.
Yeah,
is how much goes into private schools, how much is into probably what's termed the community game.
Just to be clear, Bruce. So we like the difference in Ireland, and a lot of people they think that the IRFU fund the schools. They don't. Like this is the beauty of this model is that the schools are so competitive and so proud of their own sporting prowess that they invest money from fees, past pupils, sponsorship. So it comes outside the IRFU. Which is amazing.
It's the same here, but there's as you say, there's that perception that but you have to be in a private school, and it's not that you have to be, but the facility, the staffing, the resource, the time on task is massively beneficial in that environment than it is in a government school. I'm interested when you said about commentating on Leicester schools, and I was lucky enough coached against some of them when I was in a school here. Can you throw us a couple of names of not necessarily generational players, but there are a couple of players that in a couple of years' time we're going to say Bernard told us about them?
Yeah, there's a second row coming out of St. Michael's, David Walsh. So Michael's it's amazing. So Michael's have had a lot of second rows, right? So we so the James Ryan, Ross Maloney, Ryan Baird, Josh Murphy, who plays more 6 now, but coming through. But there's a guy, David Walsh. He's about 6'7", really good leader, well built, physical. He's very similar to James. I saw James Ryan in school as a 15, 16, 17-year-old. So he's very he for me, he looks like he has everything to go all the way, And and look at you. Sometimes those talented schoolboys don't, but he's certainly somebody that I think caught my eye anyway.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Bernard, listen, I really appreciate you giving us your time and your insight. But I think you've got to go on to Australia Rugby News now to talk to the Wallabies about David Nucifora coming over there.
No, thanks a million for having me. And sure, we'll chat you during the year. All right.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks a lot, Bernard. Great to see you.
Bernard.
Thanks, boys. Good luck.
Thank you. I love that, Gavin. Even that bit makes me laugh. I get to commentate on Leicester schoolboy rugby. It's a completely different environment.
Do you know, I was just going to say that, like, the idea when we were in Dublin for the Six Nations game, and there was a Ireland 20s obviously played Scotland 20s the night before, and after the work events had finished, we walked a pub not far from the Aviva, and there were probably 10 screens in this pub, and every single one of them had Ireland 20s against Scotland. And there was a few of us who made that point. You don't get that here. Like, there's not that level of and that probably to one of Bernard's many points is that how do you generate that level of interest in the game as a whole and get people really invested in it beyond the hardcore kind of rugby fan that is going to sit on a Friday night and watch the 20s, so that in 5 years' time, 2 years, 3 years' time, they can say, actually, I remember watching this kid play for the 20s, a couple of years ago. I
tell you what, he's made me feel a lot better. That has been really useful for me to learn Bernard's opinion on what David Nucifora has brought to Irish rugby and the potential he's got for Scottish rugby.
Yeah, I think I do too. I think, he's got his CV's incredible. I think I would expect that he'll shake a few trees at Murrayfield and probably ruffle a few folks' feathers in the process of trying to get this right. I suppose my one concern is that it's a 2-year deal, and
I hear you, but I never asked, and I don't know if Bernard knew, but I don't know what he signed initially with Ireland. But how many, professional organisations apart from Chelsea are throwing away, long-term contracts? And he's a consultant, and he's probably at an age where I've been at the top for 10 years. Can I be, 2? I'll give you 2 years, and I'll help with succession. I'll put things in place. Like you've said, I'll rattle some cages, or what did you say? Shake trees and ruffle feathers. You're throwing them out today.
We're all there. We're all in there. One sentence.
Yeah. So I think there's a chance for him to put things in place that maybe others are not necessarily brave enough, but just don't have the experience that he's got. And, I asked him, he had 10 years. There'll be things that he could change or not do, and maybe we're going to get 5 years worth out of him in 2.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And I think almost, what was the point I was going to make before you interjected was, if it is 2 years or if it's 5.
Did I interject and put you off?
You did. You threw me completely off.
Okay. Did I do it again?
I'd rather you didn't.
Right, okay.
The point though is, like, you hope that whoever is his successor then has enough of an understanding of what the last X number of years, 2 years have been under David Nucifora, that we then don't go 10 steps forward and then 7 steps back in however many years' time when he has.
Here's one for you. Leo Cullen. 2 years' time, Leo Cullen.
And that's the kind of thing that I was, I wouldn't be hugely surprised if it's somebody that's got a really good understanding of what working with David Nucifora looks like. Could it be, and this is probably a completely left field, could it be that in 2 years' time that's Gregor's job,
Hmm.
and that somebody, you know, is identified or taken from within the Scottish coaching system, whether that's Pete Horn or Steve Tandy, who are in the Scotland setup, or Franco, or, you know, somebody like a Ben Cairns, who's been a really good club level coach, and you take them and put them in like at the top job, you know. So I think of somebody like Pete Horn, the progress he's made in a short period of time from his own playing retirement to going into coaching, it's not out with the realm of possibility that he could then step up and do a head coach's job. And you take somebody like Gregor Townsend and move him into the performance director, having had 2 years, 3 years, whatever it might be, working with David Nucifora.
That worked with Alec Ferguson and Davy Moyes, didn't it?
Perfect.
No, I get what you mean, and part of Gregor, you wonder, does he go to France and, you know, take on a job, or Scotland hasn't really been the stepping stone for any coach.
Mm-hmm.
No one's really left a Scotland job and gone in to something more, whereas Gregor, I think stock is still high enough that potentially he, and obviously experience in France, he could potentially go and coach La Rochelle or somebody in France, or I don't know, maybe he disappears to Japan because he's always, you know, he played Super Rugby, played in Australia, he's played in France, he's looked for other challenges. Maybe that's an option. Anyway, we're into crystal ball stuff now. I think the positives for me are he's got the experience. I'm actually not that upset that it's only 2 years, because I still am hopeful that we're going to have Scots in jobs at Scottish Rugby. So maybe there's a chance to develop that. But I don't know, did I get in trouble for saying stuff like that? I hope I didn't get in trouble for saying stuff like that. But that's...
No, I don't think so. I think that's a fair... I think it's a fair want to... You know, if Bernard talked about getting the players... Like, I mean, how good would it be having all of the Scots that play overseas all playing in Scotland? And
yeah, I get that. There's a romance to that, but actually I'm not fully on board with that. I like that we've got players in other cultures and learning other things, but
I think the big difference from what Bernard was talking about in terms of the Team Ireland aspect to that is that they have a policy that anybody who plays overseas isn't available to play for Ireland. I think
we can't do that.
We can't do that. I think that's the big difference. But again, like, if that's the goal for players in this model that David Nucifora is going to bring, why shouldn't it be the goal for coaches? You know, why shouldn't we be saying, actually, Sean Everett is a nice guy. He's had a dodgy first year with Edinburgh. I think they didn't get to where they wanted, but some of the stuff, you know, they eked out results in some games. They won a lot of games. They just didn't get those bonus points that put them in the playoffs, and then they fell off a cliff at the end of the season. Franco Smith's done a great job, but do we want two South African coaches? Why can't we want for there to be two Scottish head coaches of Edinburgh and Glasgow?
It's interesting you say that there's a policy for players but not for coaches.
You know, why can't we go to Clark Laidlaw and say, actually, we really want you to come back and be a coach?
Do you know, if Clark gets the Glasgow job and takes Chris as his assistant, and they bring Grieg back for Japan to be Edinburgh coach, and you've got the Laidlaws at the opposite end of the M8 as the head coaches.
It's ready-made.
In fact, oh no, I was going to say Chris could be Scotland Sevens coach, but he can't be. But aye, that would be interesting. That would be interesting.
But there are people that are in top jobs elsewhere. You know, we've talked about on this forum and others, I don't know how many times, but the fact that Richie Gray is not involved in the Scotland setup, in that Scottish Rugby setup, is to me is an oversight. Whether that's an oversight, you know, that can be fixed.
I'm not getting into that one.
Yeah.
You totally tried to stitch me up there.
I have not. I have definitely not. I mean, would it be the first time I've stitched you up? Probably not. But you know,
No, listen, there's still, of course there are. And, you know, I don't know what Brian Eason's ambition is. You know, there are Scottish coaches out there. There's no question. It's maybe they're away learning somewhere else and they bring that learning back. I would, you know, I'd love to see that. I think David Nucifora, I liked Bernard saying, you know, they've been in URC meetings for the last 10 years. He's had meetings with Scottish staff, and so he won't be coming in blind. He did make me chuckle when he made the point that when David Nucifora first came across, it was everyone's okay in Australia and it's better there. We've had a couple of them before.
Not naming any names, but yes,
but we've had some of that before, and I think that's important. And, you know, the very first question, what is the opinion of Scottish Rugby in Ireland? And Bernard was actually, I don't know if he was being diplomatic, but he gave a stronger assessment than I thought. It helps that Glasgow have won the URC. It probably helps that we've got some standout players that could potentially be lions. There are tall trees that are poking through the canopy. That's us. We've rattled some cages, shaken some trees, ruffled some feathers, and now we've got trees through the canopy. But I think there's a lot there to be positive about.
Yeah, I think the stage that Scotland are at now is that there are tweaks that need made to take us to the level where, you know, I spoke to Grant Gilchrist last week, and he was talking about how do you get success at a national team level that's, you know, we've now reached the stage where we can win 3 Six Nations games. Okay, that's, you know, wouldn't be deemed success by other countries, but actually what we need now is somebody to come in who's got the experience of winning 4 or 5 and say, look, these are the things you've done well, tweak these and make this change, and that'll take you to the next step of winning 4 games, and you automatically put yourselves in a championship. You know, Scotland realistically played 3 decent Six Nations or 2 decent Six Nations games, crumbled against Italy, and then we're up against it, whatever on the line in playing Ireland and Dublin. You know, if we'd beaten Italy, you're all of a sudden going into that last weekend, you're in a championship decider, and that's a position we've not been in and we should be in, hopefully in the next couple of years, and hopefully those are the types of things David Nucifora changes. You know, it's 9 years since Glasgow won the Pro 12. It's taken 9 years for that success to be replicated. Hopefully in the next 2 or 3 we can do it again.
There's a lot in there, though, because there's no way that was in the plan for Glasgow to win last year. To me, that, and maybe I'm wrong, but
not according to Henko Venter. If you read the interview that I spoke to him earlier in the week,
and I get that, but when they won 9 years ago, the plan's been through, I don't know, 20 different versions, because by Franco Smith shouldn't have even been the coach in the plan last year. So there's no way it could have been planned to win that. And it's also making me giggle when you're saying, you know, Scotland should be winning that, because England are saying the same thing. France are saying we should be winning a Grand Slam. Ireland are saying we should be winning a Grand Slam. So all of a sudden you've got Ireland, France and England saying we should be winning the championship. And we're saying, but with this generation of players, we should be winning the championship. And I mean, I'm looking at the Six Nations, and I know we've got autumn to go through, but you're able to line up a whole load of reasons for not winning autumn tests, but actually the Six Nations is the results are what stand. You can play really well and get beat, and nobody's really that bothered because there's a league table. You can play well in the autumn and lose, and you can say, oh, but we're building for the Six Nations, but you only know you're building when you get to the Six Nations. So all of that. And if David Nucifora didn't crack the club game in Ireland, that's my only sadness out of that chat with Bernard, because I almost want them to hire somebody just to sort out the club game, and I know that's never going to happen.
You know, the bit that you feel so I'm so undecided about is that Bernard said it feels like in Ireland they needed a bridge between the All Ireland League and the Pro. You know, we've just done away with ours.
Well, he actually said he obviously didn't know about that, because he was like, you probably need a bridge between there and there. And you're like, well,
you know, and we have done away with ours, and now you think, well, the onus is on amateur clubs to fill a gap between the grassroots amateur game and the high performance professional game, and I'm not sure. I think
that is another day, because I've got very strong opinions on that, and you've probably heard some of them before, and you'll definitely hear them again. Listen, mate, loved that, and it was great having a guest on, because it meant I didn't have to listen to you slaver all the time. I've absolutely loved it, pal. I know, and I was the second baldest man on that pod. So I like
that incredibly, and I'm taking this, and I'm definitely getting it in there. That is the podcast, the only podcast I will ever be on where I'm the person with the most hair, and I'm claiming that forever.
And if I told the viewers the truth, the reason we couldn't get there last night was I was washing my hair, so that was why we weren't able to be on screen last night. Yeah, listen, pal, great to see you.
You too.
Great to see you. So £1 for 6 months, £12 for the 12 months. You can watch all this stuff. Get your questions in. Pose us some questions through the week for the pods that are coming up. What do you want us to talk about? Who do you want us to talk about? And we'll get Gav to put the big questions to the folk he's speaking to, and then we'll chat about it after. This has been the Scotland Rugby News Podcast. I was Bruce Aitchison. He was Gavin Harper. See you all next week. Thank you and good night.